Video games have taught me a lot, but what they never taught me was how to talk about grief.
This was Sylvester Hansen, the designer and developer of Unsafe. After the tragic loss of a close family member, his aunt, creating this game was the only way he could help his three teenage cousins to cope with the loss of their mother. He says in his TED Talk that sorrow is not a thing to be taken lightly, yet I make a game out of it. But then I raise the question why? Why make a game out of it? How will this help anyone? Thus, bringing in the aspect of representation of real life serious concerns such as grief and loss in relation to video games and its versatility as a medium. I argue that contemporary video games are beyond the scope of fun and games and have become serious in their positions in our social cultural space.
Do you like that?
However, before we delve into serious games and how they represent our real world, let us understand how video games actually create meaning. Academic and game developer Ian Bogost defines this as the procedural rhetoric. This is the act of persuasion through rule based representations and interactions rather than spoken word, writing, images, or moving pictures. Thus, this is the act by which the video games persuade players of its underlying meanings and themes and hammer home a message which isn't on the surface. Games use its rules and processes to create its ultimate meaning. For example, in Overcooked 2, which looks super fun and apparently without the baggage of additional significance. Yet, players describe that by making the kitchen area chaotic, the game is forcing the players to coordinate and communicate effectively in order to survive in this world, thus creating a message which goes beyond the scope of the game and applies to real life. But what happens when a game is about grief? Does the subject matter complicate the usual conventions of rules and design?
Grief is not something that could be summed up in a game that's happy or open and positive. This needed to be an experience that reflected the experience and the depth of grief.
This raises the question about game mechanics and outcomes. Is there winning and losing involved in this? Does this mean that serious games lose their ability to be playable? Well, no. Such games overthrow the argument of ludology by Espen J. Arseth. He says that when we play video games, it is only about winning or losing. But it is evidently not. I want to argue that serious games are not restricted in the dichotomy of winning and losing, but are much more expansive in their remit and motive.
We'd all prefer to win. But when you discover that you can't win, what do you value instead?
We value experiences. Games are fun, but more than that, they are experiences. Often our in-game experiences merge into outer experiences from the game world to the everyday world. We just heard from Amy Green, one of the developers of That Dragon Cancer. She, along with her husband, created this game to cope with the loss of their child to cancer. This is a striking example which portrays the versatility and depth of the medium of video games.
That Dragon Cancer is a gut punch of an experience that handles its difficult themes with grace and brutal honesty. There were times I was not sure what I was meant to be doing, as the idea of reaching a goal is beside the point here. It's a crushingly intimate game that left me grateful for the people who are still in my life and reflective on those who are not.
This game does not comply with the conventions of having rules to impart meaning, thus subverting the theory of procedural rhetoric. That Dragon Cancer imparts meaning and significance through its closeness to reality. It takes the players on a journey that is difficult and one they cannot win. Amy Green explains,
We made a video game that's hard to play. But that feels just right to me because the hardest moments of our lives change us more than any goal we could ever accomplish.
The Game Awards is one of the most prestigious accolades in the industry, and that Dragon Cancer won in 2016 under the category of Game for Impact.
The earliest video games were strictly about entertainment, but they were soon followed by educational games.
Today's developers are blurring the lines between the two forms to explore new subjects and create socially conscious, progressive works of art that can inspire and transform the world around us.
Jeff Kiley, the exec producer and host of Game Awards, defines the Game for Impact category as one that recognizes a thought-provoking game with a profound pro-social meaning. Hence, this category recognizes games which leaves a profound impact on the audience and helps them in some way. Interestingly, this reminds me of something actor Andrew Garfield said in one of his interviews. He connects the loss of his mother and his performance in his film Tick Tick Boom, and essentially highlights the healing effect of art.
I'm indebted to everyone who's brought me to this place so that I can honor the most beautiful person that I've ever experienced in my life through my art, and use it as a way to heal, use it as a way to sew up the wounds, because that's what we do, right? That's what we do.
Sewing up wounds. This beautifully brings in another game in question which won the 2019's Game for Impact Award, Grease. This is a beautiful game which uses its art style to imbibe meaning and significance. Narratologist Janet Murray explains that video games offer more than any single form of media, as games combine and remediate all existing forms of storytelling. Grease is again a game which isn't about winning or losing, but rather going on an introspective journey to understand grief and its facets. This is done through the elements of storytelling such as visual imagery, narrative, and sound design.
It's been argued that each segment of Grease represents one of the 5 stages of the Kubler-Ross model, better known as the 5 stages of grief. And each stage is painted with an appropriate shade to try and illustrate that emotion.
This dynamic use of color sets apart Grease and persuades the players to continue their journey. This makes them recognize the progress. Hence, the procedures of the gameplay introduces the meaning and conforms to the theory of procedural rhetoric. In conclusion, both the games in question complicate the usual conventions of video game and add another layer of meaning by their closeness to reality. The healing narratives and the strong emotional representations in contemporary video games paved the way for creativity, innovation, and future developments in the game industry.